The city lights of Chicago blurred through the restaurant's rain-streaked windows as I balanced another tray of overpriced cocktails. My feet ached in the cheap flats I'd bought last week, and the persistent throb behind my eyes reminded me I'd been standing for 11 hours straight. The scent of truffle oil and expensive cologne hung heavy in the air of Sovereign, the kind of establishment where a single appetizer cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I'd been working here for 3 months now, ever since the research position at Northwestern fell through. 4 years of studying criminal psychology, countless hours analyzing behavioral patterns and motivational theory, and here I was, serving drinks to men in $1,000 suits who barely acknowledged my existence. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Riley, table 12 needs their check," Marco hissed as he swept past me, his Italian accent thick with irritation. As the floor manager, he took pride in Sovereign's reputation, and any delay was a personal affront. "And Mr. Volkov's party will be arriving in 20 minutes. Make sure their usual table is perfect." I nodded, already moving toward table 12 where a group of lawyers were celebrating some corporate victory. As I processed their payment, I couldn't help but observe them through my trained lens. The senior partner sat at the head, his body language broadcasting dominance even in victory. The younger associates laughed too loudly at his jokes, their anxiety visible in the tension around their eyes. Years of studying human behavior had made me unable to turn off my analytical mind, even here. The autumn rain had intensified, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency. I glanced outside where the Chicago skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the dark sky. Somewhere out there was the life I'd planned, the career I'd worked for, the future that had seemed so certain before budget cuts and departmental restructuring had pulled it all away. Lost in thought again? Sophia, one of the other servers, smiled sympathetically as she passed. She was the closest thing I had to a friend here, though we rarely talked about anything beyond shift schedules and difficult customers. "Don't worry, Friday nights go fast." I returned her smile, grateful for the small kindness. But she was wrong about time passing quickly. Every hour felt like an eternity. Every shift a reminder of how far I'd fallen from my ambitions. My student loans wouldn't pay themselves, and the tiny studio apartment I rented in Logan Square demanded its monthly tribute, regardless of my wounded pride. The front door opened, bringing with it a gust of cold air and the low murmur of expensive cars pulling up to the curb. I recognized the subtle shift in the restaurant's atmosphere immediately. The ambient noise level dropped. Even the kitchen seemed to quiet. Marco straightened his tie and smoothed his already immaculate jacket, while the hostess fixed her lipstick with trembling hands. Roman Volkov had arrived. I'd never seen him in person before, only heard the whispered stories from other staff members. The owner of half the city's luxury properties, a man whose business empire stretched from legitimate real estate to ventures no one discussed openly. The kind of power that made politicians return his calls and made the police commissioner attend his charity galas. I busied myself with wiping down an already clean table, keeping my head down as his entourage entered. 3 men flanked him, their eyes constantly scanning the room with the practiced wariness of professional security. But it was the man in the center who commanded attention without seeming to try. Roman Volkov was perhaps in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. His dark hair was styled back from a face that could have graced magazine covers, all sharp angles and aristocratic features. But it was his eyes that caught me, pale gray like winter ice, assessing everything and everyone with the cool calculation of a predator evaluating prey. He moved through the restaurant with the absolute confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to any space he occupied. The usual table in the back corner, the one with sight lines to both entrances and walls protecting his back, had been prepared according to his exact specifications. Crystal glasses caught the ambient light. The wine had been decanting for precisely 30 minutes. Everything was perfect, as it always had to be for Roman Volkov. I kept my distance as Marco personally escorted them to their table, but I couldn't help observing. Two of the men with him were clearly bodyguards, their bulk barely contained by their suits, hands never far from their sides where I suspected weapons were concealed. The third man was different, leaner, with sharp features and eyes that reminded me of a calculating accountant. His suit was less expensive, but perfectly tailored, and he carried a leather portfolio that seemed to hold Roman's attention. They settled into their seats with the ease of routine. Vodka appeared immediately, the premium Russian import that Sovereign kept specifically for Mr. Volkov. The conversation was low, heads bent together, and I recognized the body language of serious business discussion. The accountant type opened his portfolio, sliding documents across the table that Roman reviewed with those cold eyes. "Riley, you're covering Section 3 tonight." Marco appeared at my elbow, his voice tight with stress. "Carla called in sick. That includes Mr. Volkov's table." My stomach dropped. Section 3 was the VIP area, reserved for the restaurant's most important and demanding clients. I'd been deliberately kept away from it during my time here, relegated to the regular dining room where mistakes were more easily forgiven. "Marco, I've never worked that section. Maybe Sophia should—" "Sophia is handling a party of 15. You're the only one available." His expression brooked no argument. "Don't make me regret this, Riley. Mr. Volkov's satisfaction is crucial to this establishment. Be invisible. Be perfect. And for God's sake, don't engage in conversation beyond taking orders." I nodded, my mind already running through everything I knew about high-level service. The psychology wasn't so different from my studies. Read the client, anticipate needs, maintain appropriate distance, never intrude. I could do this. I approached their table with my most professional smile, keeping my eyes respectfully lowered. The conversation paused as I arrived, and I felt the weight of Roman's attention settle on me like a physical thing. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I offer you any appetizers this evening?" "The usual," Roman said, his voice a low rumble with just a trace of an accent, Russian perhaps, though years of American life had smoothed most of it away. "And bring menus for my associates." "Of course, sir." As I turned to leave, I caught a fragment of their conversation resuming. Something about shipments and customs, about percentages and territories. The words themselves were innocuous, but the tension underlying them made the hair on my arms rise. This wasn't a casual business dinner. This was negotiation, possibly conflict, the kind where much more than money hung in the balance. I placed their order with the kitchen and retrieved menus, my mind working automatically even as my observational instincts kicked into overdrive. I couldn't help it. Analyzing behavior was as natural to me as breathing, and everything about this table screamed danger wrapped in expensive packaging. When I returned with menus and fresh vodka, I noticed something that made me pause. One of the bodyguards, the larger one with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, was sweating despite the restaurant's careful climate control. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. His eyes darted to the kitchen doors, then to the exits, with a frequency that went beyond professional vigilance. Fear. I recognized it immediately, but not fear of external threat. This was guilt-driven anxiety, the physiological response of someone about to do something they dreaded. I set down the menus with practiced efficiency, my mind racing. In my criminology courses, we'd studied countless case files of betrayal within criminal organizations. The patterns were consistent: nervousness, hypervigilance, physiological stress responses. This man was terrified, and not of strangers. "Will there be anything else, gentlemen?" I kept my voice professionally neutral, even as alarm bells rang in my head. "That will be all." Roman dismissed me without looking up from the documents he was reviewing. I retreated to the service station, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The scarred bodyguard's behavior was textbook pre-incident stress. I'd written a paper on it in my junior year, analyzing case studies of informants and double agents. Everything about his demeanor suggested he was about to make a move he couldn't take back. My hands shook as I checked on other tables, going through the motions while my mind spun with terrible possibilities. I was probably overreacting, probably letting my academic training create patterns where none existed. This was the real world, not a case study. People got nervous for all sorts of reasons. But I couldn't ignore the way the scarred man's hand kept moving to his jacket pocket. Couldn't dismiss the way he positioned himself slightly behind Roman, his angle perfect for... The realization hit me like ice water. From his current position, if he drew a weapon from that pocket, he'd have a clear shot at Roman's back. The other bodyguard was too far away to intercept. The accountant was focused on his documents. Roman himself was completely vulnerable, his attention divided. This was an assassination attempt. I was witnessing the seconds before a murder. My psychology training kicked in, overriding my fear with cold analysis. Direct confrontation would trigger the event. Drawing attention would force his hand. I had maybe 30 seconds before whatever plan he'd made reached its point of no return. I grabbed a full tray of drinks, the kind servers carried carefully through crowded spaces, and started toward their table. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. If I was wrong, I'd look like a clumsy fool and probably lose my job. If I was right... The scarred bodyguard's hand disappeared into his jacket. I was 5 feet away when I stumbled, deliberately, throwing myself forward with all the gracelessness I could muster. The tray flew from my hands in a cascade of expensive alcohol and crystal. Drinks splashed across the table, across the documents, across the bodyguard who'd been reaching for his weapon. He lunged backward with a snarl of surprise, his hand emerging empty as vodka soaked his jacket and shirt. Roman moved with startling speed, rising from his seat as the other bodyguard stepped forward, hand inside his own jacket. The accountant grabbed his portfolio, protecting the documents from the spreading liquid. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, dropping to my knees to gather broken crystal, playing the role of mortified server. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Volkov. I don't know how I..." But Roman wasn't looking at the mess. He was looking at his bodyguard, at the way the man had moved, at the bulge in his jacket where his hand had been. And I saw the moment understanding dawned in those ice-gray eyes. "Dmitri," Roman said, his voice utterly calm despite the chaos around us. "Show me your hands." The scarred bodyguard, Dmitri, froze. His eyes darted to the exits, calculating distances, weighing options. Then his hand shot back into his jacket, and everything erupted into violence. The other bodyguard moved with brutal efficiency, his hand emerging from his jacket with a weapon I couldn't fully see before he'd grabbed Dimitri's wrist. The crack of bone was audible, even over the sudden screams of nearby diners. Dimitri's gun. Because that's what it had been. I'd been right. Oh God, I'd been right. Clattered to the floor as he howled in pain. Roman remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged, as if watching a man's arm break was no more remarkable than observing the weather. Around us, chaos erupted. Diners scrambled from their seats. Marco appeared from nowhere, his face white with terror and confusion. The other bodyguard had Dmitri pinned against the wall now, one hand on his throat, the other restraining his shattered wrist. "Everyone remain calm." Roman's voice cut through the panic like a blade. Not loud, but carrying absolute authority that made people freeze mid-flight. "There's been a small disturbance, but it's contained. Please, return to your meals. Your dinners tonight are complimentary, courtesy of the house." The promise of free food and Roman's commanding presence worked some kind of magic. People settled back into their seats, uncertain but obedient. Marco rushed forward, already on his phone, probably calling the police, but Roman raised a hand. "That won't be necessary, Marco. This is an internal matter. My associate had too much to drink and became aggressive. We'll handle it privately." Marco's mouth opened, then closed. I saw the calculation in his eyes. The police meant questions, investigations, bad publicity. Roman Volkov offering to handle things quietly was a gift. Of course, Mr. Volkov. Whatever you need. Excellent. Have your staff clean this mess, and bring a fresh bottle of the Beluga Gold line. Roman's gaze finally settled on me, still kneeling in broken glass and spilled vodka. You. Come with me. It wasn't a request. The remaining bodyguard, still holding Dmitri like a doll, moved toward a back hallway that led to Sovereign's private dining rooms. Roman followed, and after a moment of paralysis, so did I. My legs felt like water, my hands trembling as adrenaline crashed through my system. The private room was elegant and windowless, with a single table and chairs upholstered in deep burgundy. The bodyguard shoved Dmitri into one of the chairs, then took position by the door. Up close, I could see the weapon holstered under his jacket now, no longer concealed. Roman settled into a chair across from his would-be assassin with the casual ease of a man settling in for a pleasant conversation. Only his eyes betrayed anything else. They'd gone from ice to something colder, darker, absolutely void of mercy. "How long?" Roman asked quietly. Dmitri said nothing, cradling his broken wrist, his face twisted in pain and defiant rage. "How long?" Roman repeated, his voice dropping even lower. "Have you been planning to put a bullet in my back, Dmitri?" 3 months, the traitor spat. 3 months of watching you pretend you're some kind of king. 3 months of listening to your orders like you're God himself. "Who paid you?" Dmitri laughed, a broken sound. "Does it matter? You've made so many enemies, Roman. Could be anyone. Could be everyone." Roman nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. Then his gaze shifted to me, and I felt pinned like a butterfly on display. "You knew." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I studied criminal psychology. I recognized the behavioral patterns: pre-incident stress, guilt-driven anxiety, positioning for optimal attack angle. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I wrote my senior thesis on betrayal indicators in criminal organizations. Something flickered in Roman's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. "You're a psychologist?" "I have a degree in criminal psychology from Northwestern. I work here because the research position I was supposed to have was eliminated due to budget cuts." The words tumbled out, shock loosening my tongue. "I'm sorry about the drinks. I couldn't think of another way to disrupt his timing without triggering the event." "You saved my life." Roman stated it as fact, not gratitude. "What's your name?" "Riley. Riley Matthews." He studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling sensation of being evaluated, cataloged, filed away in whatever system he used to organize his world. Riley Matthews with a degree in criminal psychology, who works as a server and saves strangers from assassination. Interesting. The bodyguard by the door cleared his throat. "Boss, we need to move Dmitri. Questions will come." "Yes." Roman stood, smoothing his jacket as if the last few minutes had been nothing more than a brief inconvenience. "Take him to the warehouse. I'll deal with him later." His attention returned to me. "You'll come with us." Fear spiked through me. "I need to get back to work. Marco will—" "I'll handle Marco, and your employment here is finished regardless." He moved toward the door, clearly expecting me to follow. "You've seen too much to simply return to serving drinks, and you're far too valuable an asset to waste on carrying trays." "I'm not an asset. I'm a person who just wants to go home." But even as I said it, I knew how naive it sounded. I'd just witnessed an attempted murder. I'd interfered in something far beyond my understanding. There was no going home, not to the life I'd known an hour ago. "You're a person who uses criminal psychology to read behavior patterns," Roman corrected, his voice holding a note of something almost like respect. "A person with skills I can use. Come, Riley. We have much to discuss." The bodyguard opened the door, and I glimpsed Dimitri being half-carried, half-dragged toward a service exit. Marco hovered in the hallway, his expression anxious. Roman paused to speak with him, too quietly for me to hear. But I saw Marco's face transform from worry to something like relief. Money changed hands, an envelope thick with bills. "Miss Matthews is leaving my employment for a better opportunity," Roman announced. "I trust you'll process her final paycheck promptly?" "Of course, Mr. Volkov. Tonight, if she wishes." I wanted to protest, to demand they explain what was happening, but the bodyguard's hand was suddenly on my elbow, gentle but immovable, guiding me toward the same service exit where Dimitri had disappeared. The rain had intensified, turning the alley behind Sovereign into a river of reflected neon and shadow. A black SUV waited, its engine running. Another man I didn't recognize held the rear door open. The interior was leather and luxury, the kind of vehicle that cost more than most people's houses. Roman slid in first, then gestured for me to follow. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where? And from what? Roman Volkov hadn't threatened me, had in fact suggested I was valuable. But valuable to what? For what? The questions multiplied as I climbed into the SUV, the door closing behind me with the solid thunk of German engineering. The driver pulled smoothly into traffic, heading north toward the river. I recognized the route. We were going to the Magnificent Mile, where the city's most expensive real estate glittered like a crown above the Chicago River. "I understand you're frightened," Roman said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "That's reasonable. You've had an eventful evening. But understand this, Riley. You're in no danger from me. Quite the opposite. You saved my life, and I take such debts seriously. I don't want anything from you." The words came out too quickly, too desperate. "I just want to go home." "To your studio apartment in Logan Square? The one with the broken heating and the neighbors who play music until 3 a.m.? He smiled at my expression. "I make it my business to know things. And now that you've entered my orbit, knowing about you became imperative. You're 26, graduated summa cum laude. You have $73,000 in student loan debt. And your only family is a sister in Seattle you haven't spoken to in 2 years. The casual recitation of my life's details made my skin crawl. "You had me investigated in the last 20 minutes? I have resources that move quickly, and I needed to understand who had been observant enough to recognize what my own security missed." His expression darkened briefly. "Dimitri had been with me for 5 years. His betrayal will have consequences that ripple far beyond tonight. What are you going to do to him?" I asked, then immediately wished I hadn't. Some questions were better left unasked. "Nothing you need concern yourself with. Your role is finished regarding Dimitri." The SUV turned into an underground garage, descending into a space filled with expensive cars. "But your role regarding me is just beginning." We emerged into a private elevator, all mirrors and gold fixtures. The bodyguard who'd broken Dimitri's wrist pressed a button marked PH, and we rose smoothly upward. My ears popped as we ascended, climbing toward whatever waited at the top. The penthouse opened directly from the elevator. No hallway, no neighbors. The space was vast, all floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago, spreading out like a glittering circuit board. The decor was minimalist but expensive, each piece of furniture clearly chosen for both form and function. Art that looked original hung on the walls. I recognized a Rothko, or something remarkably similar. "Sit." Roman gestured to a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car. "Would you like something to drink? Water? Wine?" "Water." My mouth was desert dry, my hands still trembling with adrenaline crash. He poured from a crystal decanter, then settled into a chair across from me. The bodyguard took position by the elevator, present but trying to be invisible. Roman's tie was slightly loosened now, the first sign of casual disorder I'd seen from him. "Let me be direct, Riley, because I sense you appreciate directness. You have a skill set that's rare and valuable. You can read people, anticipate their actions, recognize threats before they materialize. Tonight proved that beyond doubt. I want to hire you. To do what? Be your personal psychologist?" The laugh that escaped me was slightly hysterical. "Analyze your enemies before they try to kill you?" "Essentially, yes." His expression remained serious. "My world is built on reading people, on understanding motivations and weaknesses. I employ lawyers, accountants, security specialists. Why not a behavioral analyst? Someone who can attend meetings, observe my associates and adversaries, tell me what their body language reveals that their words conceal. That's not how psychology works. I can't just read minds." "No, but you can observe patterns. You can recognize deception, stress, hostile intent. Tonight demonstrated that clearly." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm offering you a position that will use your actual education, Riley. I'm offering to pay you twice what that research position would have, plus benefits, plus the satisfaction of applying your knowledge in real-world situations. Real-world situations involving criminals." I didn't phrase it as a question. Roman's smile was cold. "I'm a businessman. I own properties, import luxury goods, invest in various enterprises. Some of my associates may have colorful pasts, but my businesses are legitimate." The lie was smoothly delivered, and if I hadn't studied deception for 4 years, I might have believed it. His body language told a different story. The slight tension around his eyes, the careful control of his hands, the way he held eye contact just a fraction too long. Roman Volkov was many things, but a simple businessman wasn't one of them. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. "Then I'll have my driver take you home, and we'll part as ships in the night. Though I would ask that you sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding tonight's events. For your protection as much as mine, Dimitri's employers won't be pleased their plan failed, and they might seek information about what went wrong." The implied threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Refusing meant being released into a world where Dimitri's unknown masters might come looking for answers. Accepting meant entering Roman's protection, but also his control. "I need time to think." "Of course. Stay here tonight. The guest room is comfortable. In the morning, you can give me your answer." He stood, clearly considering the conversation finished. "Victor will show you to your room. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, and the bathroom has everything you might need." The bodyguard, Victor apparently, gestured for me to follow. The guest room was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in soft grays and whites. The promised clothes were in the closet, all in my size, which suggested Roman's investigation had been even more thorough than he'd admitted. The bathroom was marble and chrome, stocked with luxury toiletries that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I stood under the shower's rainfall head, letting water wash away the evening's terror and confusion. My mind spun with impossible choices. Accept Roman's offer and enter a world I didn't understand, working for a man who was clearly far more than he claimed. Refuse and hope that whoever had hired Dimitri didn't come looking for loose ends. When I emerged, wrapped in a robe softer than anything I'd ever owned, I found food waiting: soup, bread, cheese, fruit. Simple but elegant, and I realized I was starving. I ate mechanically, my thoughts refusing to settle. Through the room's windows, Chicago spread out below like a glittering promise. Somewhere in that vast city was my small apartment, my small life, my small dreams of research positions and academic papers. Safe, predictable, increasingly out of reach with every minute that passed. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Victor or perhaps a housekeeper. Roman entered, now dressed in casual black slacks and a gray sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. The veneer of business formality was gone, revealing something more primal underneath. "I couldn't sleep without knowing you were comfortable," he said, his accent slightly thicker now, as if exhaustion had loosened his careful American pronunciation. "Tonight was traumatic. I wanted to apologize for dragging you into my world so abruptly." "You didn't drag me. I chose to intervene." I set down my water glass. "I saw a threat, and I acted. That's on me. Still, you should know what you saved." He moved to the windows, gazing out at his city. "My father came to Chicago with nothing, built an empire from concrete and will and blood. When he died, I inherited not just his businesses but his enemies. Men who want what we built, who see weakness in transition of power. Dmitri was one of those enemies. Dmitri was a tool, someone's weapon, finding out whose will be my priority tomorrow." He turned back to me, and the exhaustion in his eyes was genuine. "But tonight I'm simply grateful to be alive. Thank you. Riley Matthews. Whatever you decide tomorrow, you have my gratitude." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. You asked what I'll do to Dmitri. The truth is, he'll tell me who hired him, and then he'll disappear. Not murdered. I'm not the monster you're imagining, but relocated. Somewhere he can't cause further harm. I want you to understand that I'm not needlessly cruel, but I am utterly ruthless in protecting what's mine." After he left, I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible, my mind replaying every moment of the evening. The weight of Roman's attention, the casual efficiency of Victor's violence, the stark terror on Dmitri's face when he realized his plan had failed. And beneath it all, a terrible, treacherous thought. Roman's world might be dangerous, but it was also interesting, real. After months of mind-numbing service work, of watching my education gather dust, tonight had been the first time I'd truly used my skills. The thrill of accurate prediction, of successful intervention. It had felt like coming home to myself. By morning, I knew what my answer would be. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting Chicago in shades of gold and shadow. I woke disoriented, the unfamiliar weight of 1,000 thread-count sheets against my skin, the absence of traffic noise from my usual street-level apartment, creating an eerie silence broken only by the whisper of climate control. For a moment, I could pretend the previous night had been some fever dream. Then I saw the clothes draped over a chair, designer labels, perfectly my size, and reality crashed back. I'd witnessed an assassination attempt. I'd saved a man's life, and now that man wanted to employ me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I dressed in the provided clothes, dark slacks and a silk blouse that felt like water against my skin. Everything fit perfectly, which meant Roman's investigation into my life had been thorough enough to include my measurements. The violation of privacy should have angered me more than it did, but I was learning that in Roman's world, knowledge was currency, and he spent it freely. The penthouse was quiet as I emerged from the guest room. Daylight transformed the space, revealing details I'd missed in last night's chaos. The art was original. I could see the brushstrokes on what I now recognized as an actual Rothko, worth millions. Books lined one wall, leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. This wasn't just a residence, it was a fortress of culture and wealth. "Good morning, Miss Matthews." Victor appeared from somewhere, his massive frame somehow moving silently. In daylight, I could see the scar tissue on his knuckles, the slight crook to his nose from old breaks. This was a man who'd survived violence through the application of greater violence. "Mr. Volkov is in his office. He's expecting you." I followed Victor through the penthouse to a room I hadn't seen last night. Roman's office was all dark wood and leather, dominated by a desk that looked antique and expensive. Behind it, Roman sat reading something on his tablet, dressed in another impeccable suit, this one charcoal with subtle pinstripes. He looked up as I entered, and I caught the briefest flash of something in his expression. Relief, perhaps, that I'd stayed. "Riley, please sit." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Coffee?" I had breakfast prepared. A side table held an elaborate spread. Pastries, fruit, cheeses, coffee in a silver service. My stomach growled traitorously, reminding me I'd barely eaten dinner before everything had erupted. I poured coffee, added cream, and took a croissant that melted on my tongue. "Did you sleep?" Roman asked, and the question seemed genuine, not just polite inquiry. "Eventually. You?" "No." He set down his tablet. I spent the night making arrangements. Dmitri proved surprisingly forthcoming once he understood his options. He was hired by the Kozlov organization, rivals from New York attempting to expand westward. His assignment was to eliminate me and create chaos during the transition of power. The casual way he discussed his own murder made my skin prickle. And Dmitri himself. On a cargo ship to Singapore as we speak. He'll work off his debts in one of my associates' businesses there. Hard labor, but alive. He'll never see Chicago again. Roman's expression hardened. The Kozlovs, however, require a different response. Which brings me to why I need someone like you. He rose, moving to the windows overlooking the city. My world operates on perception and reality, often in that order. The Kozlovs see weakness because my father's death was recent. They see opportunity because they think I'm young, untested, vulnerable. They need to be corrected in these assumptions, but violence alone won't accomplish that. I need to outthink them, anticipate their moves, understand their psychology. You want me to profile them. I understood now, the shape of what he was proposing. Analyze their behavior patterns, predict their strategies. Exactly, and not just the Kozlovs. I have business associates, partners, rivals, all of them constantly maneuvering, all hiding their true intentions behind carefully constructed facades. You can see through those facades. Last night proved that. I sipped my coffee, buying time to think. Everything about this was dangerous. Roman Volkov was clearly involved in organized crime, regardless of how he dressed it up in business language. Working for him meant becoming complicit, crossing lines I'd never imagined crossing. But the alternative was returning to Sovereign, to serving drinks to people who looked through me. Wasting my education, my skills, my years of study. Here was Roman, offering to use everything I'd learned, to value what I could do in ways academia never would. I need guarantees, I said finally. If I do this, I need to know I'm not going to be arrested as an accessory to crimes. I need protection, legal and physical, and I need to understand exactly what I'm agreeing to. Roman's smile was slight, but genuine. Direct. I appreciate that. He returned to his desk, opened a drawer, and withdrew a folder. This is a contract. You'll be employed by Volkov Enterprises as a consultant in behavioral analysis. Salary is $200,000 annually, plus bonuses, plus benefits including health insurance and a pension plan. You'll have an apartment in this building, company car, expense account. In return, you'll attend meetings with me, observe my associates and rivals, provide analysis of their behavior and intentions. 200,000. The number was staggering. I made 30,000 at Sovereign, barely enough to cover rent and student loans. This was transformation, financial security I'd never imagined. And the legal protection? I pressed. My attorneys will brief you on what constitutes privileged information. You'll be covered by client confidentiality. Should any legal issues arise, you'll have the full support of my legal team, the best criminal defense attorneys in the state. He slid the folder across the desk. "You're not being asked to participate in anything illegal, Riley. You're being asked to read people and tell me what you see. That's not a crime." It was sophistry, and we both knew it. If I analyzed someone's behavior to help Roman gain advantage in criminal enterprises, I was participating regardless of how we labeled it. But the rationalization was there if I wanted it. A thin shield of plausible deniability. "I need to review this with my own attorney." The words felt foolish as soon as I said them. I didn't have an attorney. Couldn't afford one. "Of course. I'll have my legal team recommend someone independent. Take the weekend to review everything. Consult whoever you wish." "But Riley..." His expression grew serious. "Once you leave this building, you become a potential target. The Kozlovs know their attempt failed. They'll want to know why, how, who interfered. Security from this moment forward isn't optional." The cage was forming around me even as he offered freedom to choose. Leave and be hunted. Stay and be owned. Some choice. "I'll need to get things from my apartment. Clothes, personal items. Victor will accompany you. He's former Spetsnaz, Russian Special Forces. Nothing will happen to you while he's present." Roman stood, extending his hand across the desk. "Welcome to Volkov Enterprises, Riley Matthews. I think this will be the beginning of something remarkable." I shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. His skin was warm, and he held the contact a fraction longer than necessary, his gray eyes searching mine for something I couldn't name. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Victor drove me to my apartment in Logan Square, his presence making my small studio feel even more cramped. My possessions looked shabby in comparison to the luxury I'd just left. Second-hand furniture, discount store dishes, everything worn and practical. "Take what matters," Victor advised, his accent thick but his English clear. "Mr. Volkov will provide the rest." I packed clothes, books, the few photos I had of my sister before our falling out, my laptop, my research notes from Northwestern, the bound copy of my thesis on behavioral indicators of criminal intent. Looking at these remnants of my previous life, I felt like an archaeologist examining artifacts from a civilization that had just ended. My phone buzzed. A text from Marco at Sovereign. "Your final check is ready. Sorry to see you go." As if I'd left voluntarily. As if this had been my choice all along. When we returned to Roman's building, my building now, I supposed, Victor led me to a different elevator, one that required a key card to access. We rose to the 32nd floor, and he showed me to an apartment that made my former place look like a prison cell. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know how to use, and windows offering a view of Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon. The furniture was new, modern, tasteful. Everything was perfect, sterile, waiting for me to make it mine. "Mr. Volkov will send for you this evening," Victor said. "We have a meeting, business associates. He wants you to observe." He hesitated at the door. "Miss Matthews, Riley. What you did last night, recognizing the threat, acting without regard for your own safety, this is not common. Mr. Volkov values loyalty and courage above all else. He will protect you as you protected him." After he left, I stood in the center of my new living room, surrounded by luxury I hadn't earned, waiting for a summons to observe criminals conducting criminal business. This was my life now. I'd traded safety for purpose, poverty for complicity, invisibility for being seen by very dangerous eyes. The afternoon stretched before me, and I used it to research. Roman's legitimate businesses were extensive. Real estate development, import, export, restaurants and clubs throughout the city. But between the lines, in newspaper articles carefully worded and police reports heavily redacted, I found hints of the empire beneath the empire. The Volkov organization controlled gambling, loan sharking, and protection rackets throughout Chicago's North Side. They had connections to Russian organized crime families, but operated independently, powerful enough to negotiate as equals. Roman's father, Alexei Volkov, had been investigated multiple times but never charged. Roman himself had been questioned twice, both times released without arrest. I was working for the mob. The reality settled over me like a weight, heavy, but not entirely unwelcome. My entire academic career had been spent studying criminals from a safe distance, analyzing them through case files and interviews. Now I would be among them, observing in real time, using my skills not to prosecute, but to protect. The ethical implications should have paralyzed me. Instead, I felt a thrill of anticipation that shamed and excited me in equal measure. Evening arrived with a knock at my door. Victor, dressed now in a suit that made him look almost civilized, smiled politely. "Are you ready, Miss Matthews?" I dressed carefully in the clothes that had appeared in my closet. Business formal, a navy suit with a silk blouse, heels that added 3 inches to my height. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked professional, powerful, like someone who belonged in Roman's world. The meeting was in a private room at one of Roman's restaurants, a place called Tsarina that specialized in Russian cuisine. We arrived through a back entrance, bypassing the main dining room entirely. Inside, 5 men waited around a table, vodka and zakouski already served. Roman sat at the head, and the others fell silent as we entered. His eyes swept over me, approval evident in his slight nod. "Gentlemen, this is Riley Matthews, my new behavioral consultant. She'll be observing our discussions going forward. Please, continue as you were." I took a seat slightly behind and to the right of Roman, positioning myself to see everyone's faces. The men ranged from their 40s to 60s, all wearing expensive suits, all carrying themselves with the confidence of power. But their reactions to my presence varied. That was what I needed to observe. The oldest, silver-haired and dignified, barely glanced at me, secure in his position, unbothered by witnesses. The youngest, maybe mid-40s with careful eyes, studied me openly, calculating, threatened by change, uncertain of his standing. 2 others showed irritation, the subtle tension of men accustomed to secrecy being asked to perform before an audience. The 5th man, heavy-set with a scarred face, smiled at me with genuine warmth that didn't reach his eyes. The meeting proceeded, discussion of territories and percentages, of shipments and schedules. Nothing explicitly illegal was mentioned, but the subtext was clear to anyone who knew how to listen. They were dividing up criminal enterprises, negotiating spheres of influence, discussing the Kozlov problem. I watched body language more than listening to words. The silver-haired man was Roman's supporter, older generation offering backing to the new boss. The young one with calculating eyes was positioning himself as eventual successor, already thinking 2 moves ahead. The irritated pair were uncomfortable with Roman's leadership, loyal to his father, but uncertain about the son. And the smiling man with dead eyes, he was the real threat, planning something even as he played the role of friend. When the meeting ended 90 minutes later, Roman walked me back to the car while Victor stayed behind to finalize details. In the private elevator, he turned to me. "Well, what did you see?" I took a breath, committing to this new role. "Alexander supports you absolutely, the silver-haired one. Mikhail is already planning your succession, thinking about how to position himself when you eventually fall. Yuri and Boris are loyal to your father's memory, not to you personally. You'll need to prove yourself to secure them. But Grigory..." I paused. "Grigory is planning something." He smiled too much, agreed too readily. He's hiding hostile intent behind performed friendship. Roman was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, and it transformed his face. "Grigory has been angling for more territory for months. I suspected he might make a move, but everyone else said I was paranoid. Your read confirms my instincts. What will you do? Watch him, closely, and when he makes his move, I'll be ready. The elevator opened into the parking garage. You did well tonight, Riley. This is exactly why I needed you. You see what others miss, what I might miss because I'm too close to it. In the car, as Victor drove us back to the building, Roman's hand found mine in the darkness. The touch was electric, unexpected, his fingers curling around my palm with possession and something else. Gratitude, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. Thank you, he said softly. For last night, for tonight, for agreeing to this. I should have pulled my hand away, maintained professional distance. Instead, I let him hold it, feeling his warmth, his strength, the steady pulse in his wrist that reminded me he was alive, because I'd seen what others hadn't. When we reached my floor, he walked me to my door. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me, saw the consideration in his eyes. But he simply lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that felt more intimate than anything else could have been. Sleep well, Riley. Tomorrow, the real work begins. After he left, I stood in my new apartment, my hand still tingling from his touch. I'd crossed a line tonight, not just into Roman's employment, but into his confidence. I'd become valuable to him, which meant I'd also become vulnerable in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. But as I prepared for bed in my luxurious new space, surrounded by evidence of my transformed life, I couldn't summon regret. For better or worse, I belonged to Roman's world now, and some traitorous part of me whispered that I might never want to leave. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm I never could have imagined. Days were spent learning the intricacies of Roman's empire, the legitimate businesses that provided cover, the shadow operations that generated real power. Evenings brought meetings where I sat silent and watchful, reading the men and women who came to negotiate, threaten, or pledge loyalty. I was good at it, better than I'd expected. My academic training translated perfectly to real-world application. I could spot deception in the micro-expressions people couldn't control, read alliances and seating choices and body angles, predict conflicts from tone and timing. Roman began to rely on my assessments, sometimes changing entire strategies based on my observations. But it was the nights that complicated everything. Roman had a pattern of appearing at my door after particularly stressful days, always with some pretext. Documents to review, questions about someone's behavior, discussion of tomorrow's agenda. We'd sit in my living room, the city glowing below us, and talk. Not about business always, but about everything else. His childhood in Moscow before his family emigrated, his father's iron rule and the weight of inherited expectations. My own history, the sister who'd cut me off after I'd refused to come to her wedding, choosing finals over family. The loneliness of being brilliant but broke, educated but invisible. The conversations felt dangerous in ways the business never did. Because in those quiet hours, Roman wasn't a crime boss. He was just a man, intelligent and isolated, carrying burdens he couldn't share with anyone else. And I wasn't his employee. I was someone who understood, who saw beneath the armor he wore for the rest of the world. Tonight we sat on my sofa with the city spread below like scattered diamonds. He'd brought wine, expensive and smooth, though I noticed he barely drank. Control was everything to Roman. He never allowed himself to be impaired, never let his guard fully down. Grigory made his move today, he said, swirling wine in his glass. Tried to convince Mikhail and 2 others to back him in pushing me out. Claimed I'm too young, too reckless, not properly Russian anymore. What did you do? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Nothing yet. Let him think his plot is secret. He'll gather more supporters, become confident, overextend himself. Then, Roman's smile was cold. Then, I'll demonstrate exactly why youth and American Polish don't equal weakness. I studied his profile in the dim light, the sharp lines of his face, the tension in his jaw. "You're going to kill him. I'm going to remove a threat to my organization and everyone who depends on it for their livelihood." He turned to me, and his expression softened. "Does that frighten you?" It should have. A month ago, it would have. But I'd spent 3 weeks observing Roman's world, seeing how it operated. Grigori wasn't some innocent. He ran prostitution rings and had personally ordered the murder of a rival's teenage son. The moral calculus wasn't simple, but it wasn't as complicated as I'd once believed either. "It should," I admitted, "but I understand the logic. In your world, mercy is weakness. Hesitation gets people killed. Our world," he corrected softly. "You're part of it now, Riley. What you think, what you see, what you understand, it shapes my decisions. You've already saved my life once and helped me avoid several costly mistakes. You're not an observer anymore. You're integral." The word hung between us, weighted with meaning beyond its definition. Integral, essential, necessary. I'd gone from invisible server to indispensable advisor in less than a month, and the transformation was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Roman set down his wine glass and shifted closer, his thigh pressing against mine. The contact sent electricity through me, heightening every sense. I could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine, could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the pulse beating in his throat, steady and strong. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice lower now, more intimate. "The Kozlovs are escalating. They attempted to bomb one of my warehouses last week. We caught it in time, but the message was clear. They want war." My breath caught. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to frighten you, but you need to know. Being close to me puts a target on you. They'll look for weaknesses, ways to hurt me. And you, Riley." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. "You're becoming a weakness I can't afford." The word should have been a warning, a push toward distance, but his hand held mine tighter, contradicting everything he was saying. "I should assign you to a different city. Somewhere safe, away from Chicago and this conflict. But I'm too selfish to let you go." I turned to face him fully, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole my breath. This man who commanded an empire with iron will was admitting need, exposing the human beneath the armor. "I don't want to go," I whispered. "You should. Any rational person would run from what's coming. Good thing I stopped being rational when I threw drinks on an assassin to save a stranger's life." His laugh was soft, surprised. Then his free hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You're extraordinary. Do you know that? In a world of people who look away, who pretend not to see, you look directly at truth and act on it." The space between us disappeared as he leaned in, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. His lips met mine with a hunger that had been building for weeks, all the tension of late-night conversations and loaded glances finally finding release. I kissed him back with equal desperation, my hands finding his shoulders, his hair, pulling him closer. He tasted like wine and danger, and something uniquely him. His hands were in my hair, tilting my head to deepen the kiss, and I felt myself falling into sensation, into the darkness and heat of him. This was madness. This was inevitable. This was the moment everything changed irrevocably. A sharp buzzing sound interrupted us. Roman pulled back with a curse, grabbing his phone from his pocket. His expression transformed as he read the message, all softness vanishing behind cold calculation. "It's Grigori. He's moved up his timeline." Roman stood, already buttoning his jacket, becoming the boss again. "Victor's downstairs. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or my men." Fear spiked through me. What's happening? He's making his play tonight. Thinks he has enough support to force me out. Roman's smile was predatory. He's wrong, but it will be messy before it's resolved. I need you safe. He moved toward the door, then hesitated, returning to kiss me once more, hard and possessive. This isn't finished, he promised against my lips. When I come back, we'll finish this conversation. Then he was gone, and I was left in the sudden silence, my lips still tingling, my heart racing with desire and terror mingled so thoroughly I couldn't separate them. I paced my apartment for 2 hours, watching the clock, imagining the worst. Roman dead in some warehouse confrontation. Victor injured or killed protecting him. The entire careful structure of power I'd come to understand, collapsing into chaos and violence. My phone stayed silent, offering no updates, and the not knowing was its own special torture. At midnight, my door lock clicked. I spun, backing away, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. But it was Roman who entered, and relief crashed through me so powerfully my knees weakened. He looked different. His suit was rumpled, his tie was gone, and there was blood on his collar and cuff. Not his blood, I realized, seeing no injuries. Someone else's. Are you hurt? I crossed to him, hands already checking for wounds I might have missed. No, it's over. Grigori won't be a problem anymore. His eyes were harder than I'd ever seen them, colder, the eyes of someone who'd just done violence and felt no remorse. Neither will the 4 who stood with him. 5 men. He'd killed or ordered killed 5 men tonight. The enormity of it should have sent me running. Instead, I felt only relief that Roman was alive, was here, was safe. What did that say about me? About what I was becoming? Don't, he said softly, reading my expression with the same skill I used to read others. Don't torture yourself with moral questions. They made their choice. They knew the consequences. This is how this world works, Riley. It's always been this way. I know. I struggled for words. I've spent my whole life studying violence from a distance, analyzing it, categorizing it, trying to understand it. But this is different. You're not a case study. What am I? He stepped closer, blood-stained and dangerous, and somehow more magnetic than ever. Tell me what you see when you look at me now. I met his eyes, using all my training to read him. Past the hardness, past the cold control, I saw exhaustion, isolation, the weight of decisions no one should have to make alone. I see someone doing what's necessary to protect what's his. Someone who doesn't have the luxury of moral philosophy because real lives depend on him making hard choices. Something in his expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through. You should be horrified. You should be running. I should be a lot of things. But apparently I'm someone who kisses crime bosses and doesn't regret it. His laugh was raw, almost painful. Then he was crossing the distance between us, pulling me against him with desperate intensity. This kiss was different from the earlier one, less controlled, more honest, tasting of fear survived and violence endured. His hands were in my hair, on my waist, everywhere, as if reassuring himself I was real, was here, was his. I pulled him toward my bedroom without breaking the kiss, too far gone to question or hesitate. We tumbled onto the bed in a tangle of limbs and expensive fabric. His jacket hit the floor, then my blouse, then everything else. Barriers dissolving until there was only skin and heat and desperate need. He made love with the same intensity he brought to everything. Focused, thorough, demanding but generous. His hands mapped every inch of me as if memorizing, claiming, worshipping. When he finally slid inside me, his eyes locked on mine with an intensity that was almost unbearable. Mine, he whispered against my lips. and it wasn't a question. Yours, I agreed, too lost in sensation and emotion to pretend otherwise. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, proof of life, of survival, of the man beneath the monster everyone else saw. I've never brought anyone here, he said softly into the darkness. To my private space. Never let anyone close enough to matter. It's safer that way, for them and for me, but with you. He paused, searching for words. With you, I can't seem to help myself. I lifted my head to look at him. I'm not afraid of you, Roman. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. You should be. I'm not a good man, Riley. I've done terrible things. I'll do more terrible things. The blood on my hands will never wash clean. His expression was stark, honest. But with you, I want to be better. Want to deserve what you see when you look at me. I kissed him, slow and deep, tasting the truth of his words. Then be better. Not for me, but because you can be. Because this empire you're building, it doesn't have to be just about power. It can be about protection, about creating something that lasts beyond violence. He pulled me tighter against him, and I felt him shudder, releasing some tension he'd been carrying alone for too long. Stay with me, he whispered. Not just tonight. Stay in this life, in my life. I know what I'm asking. I know the cost, but I'm asking anyway. I'm already here, I pointed out. Where else would I go? Somewhere safe, somewhere normal. You could still have the life you planned. Research, academia, legitimacy. I thought of my studio apartment, of serving drinks, of being invisible. I was dying in that life, Roman. Slowly, quietly, but dying nonetheless. Here, I'm alive. Terrified sometimes, morally compromised definitely, but alive in ways I never was before. He kissed my temple, my cheek, my lips. Then we'll be alive together. And maybe damned together too. We fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time since my life had exploded 3 weeks ago, I felt something like peace. The danger hadn't vanished. If anything, it had intensified. But facing it with Roman felt different than facing it alone. I woke to find him gone, a note on the pillow in his precise handwriting. Business to handle. Stay inside today. Victor is outside your door. Tonight, there's someone I want you to meet. Wear something formal. R. The day passed in strange limbo. Victor brought breakfast, reported that the situation from last night was contained, and stationed himself like a sentinel outside my door. I worked on analysis reports, reviewed security footage from recent meetings, tried to focus on anything but the memory of Roman's hands on my skin, his voice whispering mine. Evening arrived with a delivery, a dress in midnight blue, designer label, cut to emphasize without revealing. Shoes, jewelry, everything coordinated with expensive taste. A second note. For tonight, you'll be meeting my mother. R. His mother. The word sent a bolt of panic through me. Meeting family meant something, implied permanence, suggested this was more than just physical attraction and mutual convenience. I dressed carefully, my hands trembling slightly as I fastened the diamond earrings that had arrived with the dress. Victor drove me to a restaurant I recognized, one of Roman's legitimate businesses, an upscale establishment overlooking the river. We were shown to a private room where Roman waited, devastating in a black suit. But it was the woman beside him who captured my attention. Svetlana Volkova was in her 60s, steel-gray hair in an elegant chignon, dressed in a dark green dress that spoke of old money and older traditions. Her eyes, the same storm gray as her son's, assessed me with the same intensity Roman used, missing nothing. "Mother, this is Riley Matthews." Roman's hand found the small of my back, possessive and protective. "Riley, my mother, Svetlana. Mrs. Volkova." I extended my hand, and she took it with surprising strength. "Riley, Roman tells me you saved his life, that you see things others miss." Her English was perfect but accented, each word precisely chosen. "He also tells me you're important to him, that you've become indispensable." The weight she gave the last word suggested she understood exactly what Roman was saying, without saying. "I do my best to be helpful." "Helpful." Svetlana's smile was slight. "My son doesn't use words like indispensable about helpful people. He uses them about family." She gestured to the table. "Sit. We'll eat, we'll talk, and I'll decide if you're worthy of my son's trust." The dinner that followed was an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Svetlana asked about my education, my family, my understanding of Roman's business. She probed for weaknesses, tested my loyalty, evaluated my intelligence with questions that seemed casual, but were anything but. Through it all, Roman watched with a slight smile, clearly enjoying seeing me hold my own against the woman who'd raised him. And I did hold my own, answering honestly but carefully, showing respect without submission, demonstrating the same skills that had made me valuable to Roman in the first place. "You're not what I expected," Svetlana finally said over dessert. "Roman has never brought anyone to meet me, never shown interest in a woman beyond the physical. I wondered what could possibly have captured his attention so completely." Her eyes softened marginally. "Now I understand. You see him. Not the power, not the money, not the fear he inspires. You see the man, my son." Emotion tightened my throat. "He makes it easy." "No, he doesn't. Roman is the most guarded person I know. He's been taught since childhood that showing weakness invites attack, that trust is a liability. If he's let you past those walls—" She reached across the table to cover my hand with hers. "Then you must be extraordinary. Protect him, Riley. Not just his life, but his heart. He's given you something he's never given anyone else." After Svetlana left, Roman and I stood by the windows overlooking the city. His arm was around my waist, pulling me against his side. "That was terrifying," I admitted. "Your mother is formidable. She likes you. Trust me, you'd know if she didn't." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "She's right, though, about what I've given you. I don't know how to be vulnerable, Riley. Don't know how to trust. But with you—" He turned me to face him. "With you, it feels less like weakness and more like strength." I kissed him, tasting promise and danger, and the future we were building together in blood and trust. Whatever came next, the Kozlovs, rival organizations, the constant danger of his world, we'd face it together. I'd stopped being an observer, stopped being just his employee. I'd become something else entirely, something I was only beginning to understand. "Mine," he'd said. And the terrifying, exhilarating truth was that I'd meant it when I'd answered, "Yours." 6 months transformed everything. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came changes that reshaped not just my life, but Roman's entire organization. The Kozlov threat had been neutralized. I didn't ask how, and Roman didn't volunteer details. Some truths were better left unexamined. My role evolved beyond behavioral analysis. Roman began including me in strategic planning, valuing my insights not just on people but on operations. I suggested moving deeper into legitimate businesses, using the revenue streams to insulate against law enforcement scrutiny. He listened, implemented, and watched as his empire grew more stable, more powerful, more untouchable. But success bred its own dangers. Other organizations noticed Roman's expansion, his youth, his reliance on a woman with no criminal background. They saw opportunity, weakness to exploit, and they were gathering, circling like sharks scenting blood in the water. I felt it first in the meetings. The way certain men looked at me, not with the respect I'd earned, but with calculation and contempt. A woman in a man's world, an outsider in their closed fraternity. They smiled and nodded, but their body language screamed resentment. "They're planning something," I told Roman one evening in his office. We'd fallen into a pattern of working late together, the city glowing below us, the world reduced to just us, and the empire we were building. Constantine and his Chicago rivals, the way they're coordinating, sharing information they'd normally hoard. They're building an alliance. Roman leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. To do what? To move against you. They think you're distracted, weakened by... I hesitated. By you. He finished the thought without rancor. They think I've gone soft because I trust a woman, because I've let someone close. They see it as vulnerability. Is it? I asked quietly. Am I making you vulnerable? He stood, crossing to where I sat, tilting my chin up to meet his eyes. You make me stronger, Riley. Smarter, more strategic, more human. What they see as weakness is actually my greatest asset. His thumb traced my lower lip. But they don't understand that. They see only what their limited minds can comprehend. A boss pussy-whipped, controlled by his lover, losing his edge. The crude assessment made me flinch, but I recognized the truth in it. In their world of toxic masculinity and power displays, Roman's partnership with me looked like capitulation. They couldn't conceive that two people might be more formidable together than apart. So what do? We let them make their move. Let them reveal themselves fully. Then we demonstrate exactly how wrong they are. His smile was cold. You'll help me see it coming, and when it arrives, we'll be ready. The preparation was meticulous. Roman increased security, not just around himself, but around me. Victor was joined by 2 others, men whose sole job was ensuring I remained safe. At first, the constant surveillance chafed, made me feel like a prisoner. But Roman was immovable on this point. They'll try to use you against me, he explained one night as we lay in his bed. I'd stopped maintaining a separate apartment months ago. Kidnapping, threats, harm. You're my weakness, Riley. The only thing in this world I can't afford to lose. The admission should have frightened me. Instead, it made me hold him tighter, understanding the terrible burden of caring in a world where love was a target painted on your back. Then we protect each other. He made love to me with unusual intensity that night, as if trying to memorize every touch, every sound. Something in his desperation told me the storm was closer than either of us had realized. It broke 3 days later. I was leaving Serena after a dinner meeting when the shots rang out. Victor shoved me to the ground, his body covering mine as bullets shattered the restaurant's front windows. Screams erupted around us. Glass rained down. My ears rang from the deafening reports of gunfire. Then silence, sudden and absolute. Victor pulled me up, checking me for injuries with efficient hands. Are you hurt? I shook my head, unable to speak, adrenaline making my whole body tremble. Around us, chaos. Diners hiding under tables, staff cowering behind the bar. But the shooters were gone, fled into the Chicago night. Roman arrived within minutes, his face white with fear I'd never seen before. He pulled me into his arms with bruising force, his hands checking me for injuries even as Victor had, as if he couldn't believe I was whole. They missed, I managed. Victor got me down in time. They weren't trying to hit you. Roman's voice was deadly calm now, rage replacing fear. This was a message, a demonstration that they can reach you, hurt you, take you from me whenever they choose. He was right. If they'd wanted me dead, they would have used more than a drive-by shooting. This was psychological warfare, showing Roman his vulnerability, making him afraid, making him react emotionally instead of strategically. "Don't give them what they want," I said, gripping his arms. "Don't let fear make you stupid. This is what they're counting on, you making mistakes to protect me." His jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Victor, take her to the safe house, the one in Lake Forest. No one knows about it except our inner circle." "No," I pulled away. "If I run, they win. They separate us, isolate you, take away your advantage. I stay with you. Riley. I'm not a damsel who needs protecting in a tower. I'm your partner, your strategist. Hiding me makes you weaker, not safer." I held his gaze. "We face this together or not at all." I saw the war in his eyes, the need to protect warring with respect for my agency, fear battling with trust. Finally, he exhaled roughly. "Together. But you follow Victor's instructions without question. And if I say run, you run. Agreed?" "Agreed." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in strategic warfare. Roman called in every favor, activated every asset, applied pressure to every weak point in Constantine's alliance. I attended every meeting, reading the shifting loyalties, identifying who could be turned, who needed to be removed, who might become useful allies. The violence was constant but controlled. Constantine's men hit our businesses, we hit theirs. His associates disappeared, ours were attacked. It was a dance of death, each side probing for weakness, testing resolve. Through it all, I stayed at Roman's side, protected but present. And slowly, the other men began to see what Roman had known all along. I wasn't his weakness, but his weapon. I predicted Constantine's moves before he made them, identified traitors in our own organization, suggested strategies that turned the tide in battles that should have been losses. The turning point came during a meeting with neutral parties, organizations not aligned with either side, but with interests in Chicago remaining stable. Roman had called it, seeking to isolate Constantine diplomatically, while the physical war continued. I sat beside Roman, dressed in a severe black suit, my hair pulled back, every inch the professional advisor. Constantine sat across from us, flanked by his own people, confident in his superior numbers and established reputation. "This war is bad for business," the mediator began. "We're losing money, attracting police attention. It needs to end." "I agree," Roman said calmly. "Constantine attacked my organization without provocation. He attempted to harm someone under my protection, but I'm willing to discuss terms." Constantine sneered. "Terms? You're losing, Volkov. Your men are abandoning you. Your businesses are bleeding money. And all because you let a woman make you soft." I felt Roman tense beside me, but I placed a hand on his arm, calming. Then I leaned forward, meeting Constantine's eyes directly. "You're wrong about everything," I said clearly. "Roman isn't losing. He's winning. 3 of your lieutenants have already approached us about switching sides. Your drug pipeline through the port of Chicago has been disrupted by anonymous tips to customs, tips I arranged. Your protection rackets in Lincoln Park and Wrigleyville have lost 70% of their revenue because Roman offered better terms to the business owners. You're hemorrhaging money and manpower while Roman's operation grows stronger." The room went silent. Constantine's face flushed with rage. "You think you can—" "I don't think. I know." I pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "These are financial records showing your losses over the past 2 weeks. These are signed statements from your lieutenants ready to testify against you if you push this further. And these—" I pulled out photographs. "These are images of your family's estate in Moscow. Vulnerable, accessible, unprotected. It was a bluff. We had no intention of harming civilians. But Constantine didn't know that. His eyes widened as he looked at images of his elderly mother, his sister and her children. All the soft targets he'd left behind in Russia. "You wouldn't dare," he breathed. "We wouldn't." Roman's voice was ice. "But the Chechen organization you stole territory from last year? They would. And I've shared these photographs with them, along with your current location and weaknesses. Consider it a gift, payment for peace with them. Unless," he paused meaningfully, "unless we reach an accommodation tonight." The neutral parties watched in fascination as Constantine's empire crumbled before his eyes. His leverage had evaporated. His allies were already defecting. His family was exposed. And all because he'd underestimated the woman sitting beside Roman, the weapon he'd thought was a weakness. "What do you want?" Constantine asked finally, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders. "Your territory in the South Side, your partnership in the port operations, and your public acknowledgement that this war was a mistake you regret." Roman's terms were harsh, but not impossible. He was leaving Constantine alive, diminished, but functional. A message to others: challenge me and lose, but survive to remember why you don't challenge again. Constantine nodded, broken. Agreed. After the meeting, in the car back to the penthouse, Roman was silent for a long time. Finally, he turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You terrified me tonight." I blinked in surprise. "What?" "Watching you dismantle Constantine, seeing you operate with that cold precision. For a moment, I saw you the way he must have. Dangerous, brilliant, utterly ruthless." His hand found mine. "I've created a monster." "You created a partner," I corrected. "Someone who protects what's hers the same way you protect what's yours." "Is that what I am? Yours?" I met his eyes, seeing the vulnerability beneath the question. "Completely. Just as I'm yours." "That's what they don't understand, Roman. This isn't weakness. It's multiplication of strength. Two people who would do anything to protect each other are more dangerous than any army." He pulled me across the seat into his lap, kissing me with a hunger that spoke of fear survived and love confirmed. "Marry me," he breathed against my lips. The words froze me. "What?" "Marry me. Make it official, permanent, unbreakable. Let the whole world know that Riley Matthews is mine, and I am hers." His eyes held mine, intense and serious. "I'm not asking because of tradition or expectation. I'm asking because I want everyone to know that attacking you means attacking me, that harming you unleashes everything I'm capable of. I'm asking because I love you, and I want the world to recognize that bond." Tears blurred my vision. "That's the most romantic and terrifying proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes?" I kissed him, pouring everything I felt into it. Love and fear and absolute certainty. "Yes." We announced our engagement a week later at a gathering of all the major organizations. I stood beside Roman, wearing a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. A massive emerald surrounded by diamonds. The message was clear. I wasn't just Roman's lover or advisor. I was family. I was protected by every oath and obligation that bound his world together. Some accepted it with grace, others with visible resentment, but none dared object, not after witnessing what happened to Constantine. I had proven myself not with violence, but with intelligence, strategy, and absolute willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect what was mine. That night, alone in our bedroom, Roman made love to me with reverent intensity. "You know what this means," he murmured against my skin. "Being my wife in this world. The danger never ends. The threats will come from every direction. You'll always be a target." "I know." I pulled him closer. I chose this, chose you, chose us. I'm not afraid. You should be. Maybe. But I'm not. I kissed him deeply. Besides, they should be afraid of me. I'm the woman who brought Constantine to his knees without firing a single shot. I'm the woman who sees everything they try to hide. I'm Riley Matthews, soon to be Riley Volkova. And I'm not going anywhere. He smiled against my lips, and I felt his joy, his pride, his love wrapping around me like armor. My fierce queen. Your equal partner, I corrected. Yes, he agreed. My equal. In everything. As spring turned to summer and our wedding approached, I sometimes reflected on the girl I'd been a year ago. Invisible. Broke. Serving drinks to people who looked through her. She felt like a stranger now. Someone from another life. I'd been forged in fire, transformed by danger and love, and the discovery that I was capable of so much more than I'd ever imagined. I'd become a queen in a kingdom of shadows. And I'd discovered that power, real power, wasn't about violence or fear. It was about seeing clearly, acting decisively, and loving fiercely enough to do anything, absolutely anything, to protect what was yours. The wedding was set for September, but the real marriage had already happened, sealed not with vows, but with blood, trust, and the absolute certainty that we were stronger together than apart. Whatever came next, rival organizations, law enforcement, the constant dangers of Roman's world, we would face it side by side. Mine, he'd claimed that first night. Yours, I'd answered, and every day since, we'd proven it true. The September sun cast golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse as I stood before the mirror, watching my reflection transform. The wedding dress was a masterpiece. Ivory silk that flowed like water, hand-embroidered with silver thread in patterns that reminded me of frost on windows. Svetlana had chosen it, declaring that the wife of Roman Volkov would be married in nothing less than perfection. "You're nervous," Sophia observed, adjusting my veil. She'd become my assistant 6 months ago, transitioning from sovereign to my growing staff. In Roman's world, I discovered I needed people, researchers, analysts, coordinators who could help manage the empire we were building together. Terrified, I admitted, watching my hands tremble slightly. Not of marrying Roman, of everything it represents, the permanence, the visibility. Once I become Riley Volkova, there's no going back to being invisible. You haven't been invisible in a long time. Sophia smiled, securing the final pin. You're the woman who brought the Chicago underworld to heel without firing a shot. You're a legend already. The past year had been a whirlwind. After Constantine's defeat, other organizations had approached Roman differently, with respect, with caution, with the understanding that underestimating him or his partner came with steep costs. We'd expanded operations, diversified revenue streams, and most importantly, begun the slow process of legitimizing as much as possible. It had been my idea, born from months of analysis. We can't sustain this forever on fear and violence, I told Roman one night. Eventually, law enforcement will have enough to move, or a rival will get lucky. We need legitimate wealth, legal businesses that can survive scrutiny. We need to build something that lasts beyond us. He'd listened, and together we'd crafted a 5-year plan. More real estate development, less extortion, more legal gambling operations, fewer underground games, more legitimate imports, less smuggling. It meant lower margins in the short term, but sustainability in the long term. And slowly, grudgingly, Roman's organization was transforming from pure criminal enterprise into something more complex, more durable. Not that the violence had ended. There were still threats, still challenges from ambitious rivals or desperate enemies. 2 months ago, an assassination attempt had nearly succeeded. a car bomb that Victor had spotted seconds before detonation. We'd survived, but the reminder of mortality had been stark. Roman had been different after that. More protective, more possessive. He'd accelerated our wedding plans, unwilling to wait. "I want you bound to me in every way that matters," he'd said. "Legal, social, spiritual. I want the world to know that you're mine, and I'm yours, that attacking either of us means war with both." A knock at the door announced Victor. "It's time, Miss Matthews. Mr. Volkov is waiting." My last moments as Riley Matthews. In an hour, I would be Riley Volkova, wife of Chicago's most dangerous man, partner in an empire built on blood and strategy. The woman I'd been a year ago, the invisible server with student loans and crushed dreams, felt like a ghost, someone I'd left behind in another lifetime. The ceremony was held at St. Stanislaus, a historic church in the heart of the city. Roman's mother had insisted on a traditional Russian Orthodox wedding, and I'd agreed, understanding the symbolism. This wasn't just a marriage, but a coronation of sorts, announcing to everyone who mattered that I wasn't just Roman's lover or advisor, but his wife, his equal, his partner in everything. The church was packed with people from both sides of Roman's world, the legitimate business associates and the criminal underlords, the politicians in his pocket, and the judges he'd carefully cultivated. They'd come to witness, to evaluate, to calculate how this marriage shifted the balance of power. I walked down the aisle alone, refusing the tradition of being given away. I belonged to no one but myself and Roman, and I came to this union of my own will, my own choice. The symbolism wasn't lost on the assembled crowd. This woman was no ornament, no trophy, no helpless dependent. She was a force in her own right. Roman waited at the altar, devastating in a black suit, his gray eyes locked on me with such intensity I felt it like a physical touch. Beside him stood Victor and Mikhail, his most trusted lieutenants. On my side, Sophia and, surprisingly, Svetlana. His mother had insisted on standing with me, a gesture that moved me beyond words. The ceremony was conducted in Church Slavonic and English, the ancient words wrapping around us like bindings. We exchanged rings, matching platinum bands engraved with Russian words I'd learned. Navsigda. Forever. A promise and a claim, sealed before God and witnesses who understood exactly what forever meant in our world. When the priest finally pronounced us husband and wife, Roman kissed me with possession and tenderness, a public claiming that announced to everyone watching, "This woman is mine, and I am hers, and we are formidable together." The reception was held at Tsarina, transformed into something magical with flowers and candlelight. 500 guests, all carefully vetted, all understanding that this celebration was also a demonstration of power. As Roman and I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and tributes, I read the room with the skills that had become second nature. Most guests were genuinely pleased, recognizing that a stable, strong leadership was good for everyone. Some were resentful, particularly older men who saw my influence as unnatural, wrong. A few were calculating, already wondering how to exploit this new dynamic. All of it information, data to be filed away and used when necessary. "You're working even now," Roman murmured as we danced, his hand warm against my back. "Reading everyone, cataloging threats." "Can't help it. It's who I am now." I met his eyes. "Does it bother you?" "Not even slightly. I married you knowing exactly who you are. Brilliant, strategic, dangerous when threatened. You're not the woman who saves me, Riley. You're the woman who rules beside me." The words sent warmth through me, validation of everything we'd built together. This wasn't a fairy tale where the prince rescued the maiden. This was a partnership of equals. Two people who'd chosen each other with full knowledge of the costs and dangers. As the evening progressed, toasts were given. Mikhail spoke of loyalty and strength. Svetlana spoke of finding family in unexpected places. Victor, surprisingly eloquent for a man of few words, spoke of courage and the different forms it took. Then Roman stood, raising his glass, and the room fell silent. A year ago, Riley Matthews saved my life by seeing what others missed. Since then, she saved me in countless other ways, making me smarter, more strategic, more human. Today, she became Riley Volkova, my wife, my partner, my equal in all things. To anyone here or beyond who doubts that, his expression hardened. Doubt at your peril. What threatens her threatens me. What harms her will be avenged with everything I possess. She is mine, and I am hers. And together we are stronger than any force that might rise against us. The applause was thunderous, but I heard the message beneath the celebration. Roman had just declared war on anyone who might target me, made it clear that I wasn't a weakness to exploit, but an extension of his power. It was a love declaration and a threat, wrapped together in words that this world would understand. Late in the evening, as festivities continued, Roman pulled me aside to a private balcony overlooking the river. The city glittered below us, our kingdom spread out like scattered jewels. "I have something to tell you," he said, his hand finding mine. "Something I've been waiting for tonight to share." Nervousness flickered in his eyes, so unusual I felt my own anxiety spike. "What is it?" "The FBI has been investigating me for 6 months, building a case for racketeering, money laundering, several other charges." He held up a hand as I started to speak. "But my attorneys have been monitoring their investigation. Between the legitimization efforts you've pushed and the evidence chain they've built, they don't have enough. They're going to close the investigation next month for lack of prosecutable evidence." Relief and pride surged through me. "Your legitimization worked. The plan worked. Your plan worked. You saw what I couldn't. That long-term survival meant evolution, not just domination. You've saved me again, Riley. Saved us both, and our entire organization." His hands framed my face. "But that's not all I need to tell you." I waited, reading the complex emotions in his expression. "I'm stepping back. Not from everything, but from the day-to-day operations of the criminal enterprises. I'm handing them to Mikhail and focusing on the legitimate businesses. I want—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "I want to build something with you that our children won't have to be ashamed of. An empire that can exist in daylight, not just shadows." Emotion tightened my throat. "Children?" His smile was soft, vulnerable in ways I rarely saw. "Eventually, when you're ready, I want a family with you, Riley. Not just the organization, but something real. Children who grow up knowing their parents love each other, who have choices we never had." I kissed him, tasting salt from tears I didn't remember crying. "Yes, to all of it. To the future, to evolution, to building something better." We stood on that balcony, wrapped in each other, as the city pulsed below us and our wedding celebration continued inside. A year ago, I'd been nobody, invisible, serving drinks and dying slowly inside. Now I was Riley Volkova, wife of a powerful man, architect of an empire's transformation, a force that criminals and FBI agents alike had learned to respect. The journey had been terrifying, morally complex, dangerous beyond anything I'd imagined, but it had also been exhilarating, purposeful, real in ways my planned academic life never could have been. I'd found not just love, but partnership, not just security, but power, not just survival, but transcendence. "What are you thinking?" Roman asked, reading my expression. "That I'd do it all again. Every frightening, impossible moment, because it led me here, to you, to us." I leaned into his warmth. "I chose this, Roman. Chose you. chose the danger and the darkness and the terrible beauty of it all. And I'd choose it again. Forever. Forever, he echoed, his arms tightening around me. Nafsigda. 3 months later, I stood in our bathroom, staring at a positive pregnancy test with shaking hands. We'd been careful, but not that careful, and some part of me wondered if this had always been inevitable. A child. Roman's child. The heir to everything we were building together. I found him in his office, reviewing architectural plans for a new development. His legitimate development. Completely legal. No shadow money involved. He looked up as I entered, and his expression transformed from focused to concerned in an instant. What's wrong? Instead of answering, I set the test on his desk between us. Watched comprehension dawn. Watched his eyes widen. Watched every emotion flash across his face too quickly to catalog. Shock, joy, fear, wonder. You're sure? His voice was rough. 3 tests, all positive. I'm pregnant, Roman. We're having a baby. He was around the desk in seconds, pulling me into his arms with desperate gentleness, as if I might break. A baby. Our baby. His hand moved to my still flat stomach, protective and possessive. When? 7 months, approximately. Summer. He pulled back to look at me, his eyes wet with tears I'd never seen him shed. I'm terrified. Me too. Absolutely terrified. But also, he searched for words. Also happier than I've ever been. You've given me everything, Riley. A partner, a purpose beyond mere survival, and now a child. A future I never imagined possible. I kissed him, tasting his joy and fear mixed together. We'll figure it out. Together. The way we figure out everything. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing. Roman became impossibly more protective, surrounding me with security so thorough I joked about feeling like the president. But he also respected my continued involvement in business decisions, understanding that being pregnant didn't make me fragile or incompetent. We announced it at 3 months, and the reactions were mixed. Svetlana wept with joy. Victor actually smiled. Mikhail offered gruff congratulations. The broader organization received the news with interest. An heir meant stability, succession planning, long-term thinking. The criminal elements grudgingly accepted that Roman Volkov was transforming from temporary boss to dynasty founder. And dynasties required different handling than simple power struggles. As my belly grew and spring bloomed across Chicago, I found myself reflecting on the impossible journey that had brought me here. From invisible server to criminal mastermind's wife. From broke and desperate to wealthy and powerful. From alone to loved beyond measure. Some mornings, I still woke expecting to find it all a dream, expecting to be back in my studio apartment serving drinks. But then Roman would pull me against him, his hand on my swollen belly feeling our daughter kick. Yes, daughter we'd learned at the ultrasound. And reality would settle over me like a blessing. I'd chosen this life. This dangerous, morally complex, beautiful life. And I would choose it again. Forever. One evening, 7 months pregnant and uncomfortable, I stood at our penthouse windows watching the city lights. Roman came up behind me, wrapping his arms around me, his hands cradling our daughter. Regrets? He asked softly. Not one. I leaned back against him. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. He pressed a kiss to my neck. That I wasted years without you. We found each other exactly when we were meant to. Any sooner, and I wouldn't have been ready for you. For this. And now? I turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. Now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Ruling an empire with you. Carrying our daughter. Building a future that's ours. Our daughter, he repeated, wonder in his voice. Have you thought about names? Alexandra, I said. After your father. But we call her Sasha for short. His expression crumbled, emotion overwhelming his usual control. You would do that? Name her for him? He built the foundation. We're building the future. She'll be the bridge between what was and what will be. It feels right. He kissed me then, deep and reverent, his hands gentle on my face. I love you, Riley Volkova, more than I have words for. I love you too. Forever. Navsigda. 2 months later, I went into labor at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Roman, who commanded armies of criminals without flinching, nearly fainted in the delivery room. But he held my hand through 16 hours of labor, never leaving my side, his strength anchoring me through the pain. When Alexandra Svetlana Volkova finally entered the world, screaming her rage at the indignity, Roman wept openly. He held our daughter with such careful reverence, such overwhelming love, that I fell in love with him all over again. She's perfect, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. You're both perfect. Watching him with our daughter, I understood that this was always where we'd been heading. Not just toward love or power or partnership, but toward this, creation of something more important than any empire. A family, a future. A legacy built not on fear, but on love, fierce enough to transform everything it touched. The woman I'd been would never have believed this ending was possible. But the woman I'd become knew this wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. Of Sasha's life, of our family's future, of an empire that would be something better than what came before. Mine, Roman had claimed me. Yours, I'd answered. And now, ours. This life, this love, this daughter, this future we'd built from blood and trust and absolute devotion. As I held Sasha while Roman watched us both with eyes full of wonder, I knew with certainty that every dangerous choice, every moral compromise, every terrifying moment had been worth it. This was my empire, our empire, built on love and strategy and the fierce determination to protect what was ours, and God help anyone who ever threatened it.